A soldier's surprise. I was an old man now, but I still remembered that day. The air was cold, and the morning sky was gray. My soldiers stood in a perfect line, their uniforms clean, their faces serious. They did not know what was coming, they only knew they had to be ready. Their boots pressed firmly against the ground, their hands still at their sides. They were waiting for orders, just as they had done many times before. I had told them there was an important meeting. A high officer was coming to see them. They believed me, they trusted my words. That was what soldiers did, they obeyed without question. But today was different. Today, I was not just their officer. Today, I was something else. I was the man who would give them back something they had lost. I walked between them, looking at their young faces. They were strong, they were brave, but they were also boys who missed home. I had seen it in their eyes before. In the quiet moments when the battle was far away, they spoke of their families. They remembered their mothers' voices, their fathers' lessons, their childhood before war. They never said it out loud, but I knew they longed for home, for warmth, for love. The door in front of them was closed. Behind it, a surprise was waiting. I felt my heart beat faster. I had planned this for months. I knew it would change something in them. I knew it would change something in me too. At first it had been just an idea, a small thought in my mind, but the more I thought about it, the more I knew it had to happen. These boys had seen too much. They had lived with fear, pain, and loss. Today they needed something else. Then the door opened. The room was silent for a moment. No one moved. The soldiers stared, their eyes wide. Then one by one they saw their mothers, stood there waiting, their hands shaking, their eyes full of tears. Some of them were older, their hair gray, their backs slightly bent. Others were younger, their faces still bright with youth, but all of them had the same look, love deep and endless. A young soul soldier gasped, another covered his mouth. I watched as the first mother stepped forward. Her son looked at her, frozen in place. She opened her arms. He did not wait. He ran to her, and she held him tight. She whispered his name again and again. He closed his eyes, holding on to her as if he would never let go. More soldiers moved. Some walked slowly, their hands trembling. Others ran, forgetting their training, forgetting everything except this moment. The room filled with soft cries and whispers. I stood still, watching. My chest felt heavy. This was not war, this was love. This was what they had been fighting for all along. I stood there watching the scene unfold before me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen in my years as an officer. The room, once filled with discipline and silence, was now alive with emotion. These were soldiers trained, strong, and unshaken by battle, but in front of their mothers they were simply sons. Again the weight of war seemed to disappear, if only for a little while. Some soldiers clung to their mother, others, as if afraid they might vanish like a dream. Others stood in stunned silence, as if their minds could not accept the reality before them. A few whispered words that I could not hear, but I saw the way their lips trembled. Some had not seen their mothers in years. Some had left home as boys and returned as men, hardened by war, and yet in their mother's arms they became boys once more. I stepped back, giving them space. I had done my part. Now this moment belonged to them. I had expected smiles and happiness, but I had not expected the raw, deep emotion that filled the room. Some mothers wept openly, their hands never leaving their sons' faces. They traced the lines of their cheeks, the sharpness of their jawlines, the marks that war had left behind. One mother ran her fingers over a scar on her son's forehead. He tried to smile, but his lips quivered. She pressed her palm against his cheek, her own face full of unspoken words. Another soldier, tall and broad dropped to his knees in front of his mother. He held her hands, pressing them against his forehead. She kissed his hair, whispering something only he could hear. For years I had seen these men in battle. I had watched them fight, struggle, and survive. I had given them orders, trained them, prepared them for war, but now I saw something else in them. I saw the children they once were, the love they still carried, the need for comfort they had hidden so well. And for the first time I felt the heaviness of what we had taken from them. I swallowed hard. I had believed I was doing something good, something necessary, and yet as I stood there I realized that these men, these soldiers, had paid a price far greater than I had ever understood. They had given up more than time or youth. They had given up the simple warmth of a mother's touch, the gentle sound of her voice calling their name today. If only for a moment they had it back, and in that moment I knew I had never done anything more important in my life. As I stood in the corner of the room, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The air was thick with emotions, joy, sorrow, relief. I had seen soldiers face war with unshaken resolve, but now they stood before their mothers with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. It was a strange sight, yet it felt more real than anything I had witnessed on the battlefield. One young soldier caught my eye. He was one of the toughest men in the unit, always composed, always ready. But now he looked like a child again, standing stiffly in front of his mother, as if unsure of what to do. She was small and frail, her hair streaked with silver. She lifted her hands to his face, hesitating as if afraid he would disappear. He closed his eyes at her touch, and for the first time I saw tears escape from the corners of his eyes. She pulled him into an embrace, whispering words that only he could hear. His shoulders shook, and I turned away, giving him his moment. In another part of the room, a mother held her son's hands tightly, as if anchoring him in place. "You've lost weight," she said, her voice soft but firm. The soldier smiled through his tears, nodding. "They don't feed us like you do, Mama," she laughed, wiping his face with her sleeve as if he were still a little boy playing in the dirt. Some soldiers had tried to hold back their emotions, standing at attention, their discipline still intact. But as the minutes passed, as the warmth of their mother's hands settled into their skin, the walls broke down. The room was no longer filled with soldiers. It was filled with sons, with men who had spent years pretending they didn't need this moment, but they did. I felt a lump in my throat. I had believed this was just a simple reunion, something to lift their spirits before the next mission, but now I realized how much these men had sacrificed, not just their time, not just their youth, but the comfort of home, the gentle touch of the one person who had loved them before they ever held a gun. The room buzzed with hushed conversations, with laughter between sobs, with quiet words of comfort. The weight of war had not left their shoulders, but for the first time in years it had shifted just a little. I stepped outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. The sun was setting, bathing everything in a golden glow. It was a sight I had seen 1,000 times, but today it felt different. Today, I had not just been an officer, I had been a witness to something far greater than war. I had been a witness to love, to healing, to something no battlefield could ever destroy. And for the first time in years, I felt hope as I stood by the door watching the soldiers and their mothers. Memories from my own past surfaced. I had once been like them, a young man in a uniform, Hardened by discipline, but softened by the thought of home, I remembered the way my mother used to fuss over my uniform, straightening every crease, as if that would somehow protect me from the dangers I faced. She had passed many years ago, but in that room I saw her. In every mother's eyes, in every gentle touch, in every whispered word of love. A soldier sat on a bench with his mother beside him, her hand resting over his. He had always been quiet, always serious, the kind of man who never spoke more than necessary, but now he was talking, really. Talking. He told her about his long nights on duty, about the cold mornings before sunrise, about the way he sometimes lay awake thinking about home. She listened to every word, nodding her eyes, never leaving his face across the room. Another soldier held his mother's hand tightly, his fingers rough and calloused from years of training. "I didn't think I would ever see you again," he admitted. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. His mother smiled, brushing his hair back, as she had done when he was a child. "You are here now," she whispered, and that was all that mattered. The air was heavy with emotion. Some soldiers sat quietly holding their mother's hands, as if afraid that letting go would make them disappear. Others laughed through their tears, sharing stories of childhood, of mischief, of the days before war had stolen their innocence. I saw one soldier standing alone by the window. His mother had not come. I recognized the look in his eyes, the quiet ache of longing. Without a word, one of the older women walked up to him and placed a gentle hand on his arm. She didn't know him, but she knew his pain. He looked at her for a long moment before nodding, accepting her silent comfort. I turned away, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had always thought of the army as a place of strength, of rules and discipline, but here in this moment I saw something greater. I saw the power of love, the kind that no uniform or training could erase. As the time for departure approached, the mood in the room shifted. The mothers held their sons a little tighter, whispered a few more words, memorized every detail of their faces. The soldiers, so used to standing tall and unshaken now, let their shoulders drop, now allowed themselves to be sons again, if only for a little while. And as I watched, I knew that this day would stay with them forever, no matter where they went, no matter how far from home they were. They would carry this moment in their hearts, because today, for the first time in a long time, they were not just soldiers, they were loved. As the minutes slipped away, the soldiers and their mothers clung to every second they had left together, some whispered words of love and reassurance, while others simply sat in silence, memorizing the faces they had missed for so long. The room, once filled with nervous anticipation, was now heavy with emotions, joy, longing, and the deep ache of knowing this moment would not last forever. One mother ran her fingers over her son's uniform, brushing off an invisible dust, just as she had done when he was a child. "You must eat well," she reminded him. "You must take care of yourself." He smiled, nodding, though they both knew that her words were not just about food, but about the life you wish she could still protect. He squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. "I will, Mama." Across the room, another soldier held his mother close, his arms wrapped tightly around her small frame. She was older now, more fragile than he remembered. He had left home when her hair was only beginning to turn gray. And now, as he looked at her, he saw time's imprint more clearly than ever before. "I miss you every day," he admitted. His voice was rough with emotion, But he didn't care today. He wasn't just a soldier, he was her son. Some soldiers had tried to hold back their emotions, standing stiffly as if discipline could suppress the wave of feelings inside them, but now even the most hardened among them allowed themselves to be vulnerable. They let their mothers see the boys they once were, their fears, their struggles, their deep unspoken love. I watched as a young soldier sat quietly with his mother. He had barely spoken a word since she arrived. His hands were clenched into fists on his lap, his body tense. She reached out and covered his hands with her own, her touch gentle and familiar. "Here, you don't have to say anything," she whispered. I know. His shoulders shook, and for the first time in years, he let himself cry. In the far corner, an older woman sat beside a soldier who was not her son. She had come because his mother could not. She held his hand as if he were her own, and in his tired eyes I saw gratitude. He may not have had his mother here, but in that moment he was not alone. As the final minutes approached, I felt a deep weight in my chest. I had arranged this meeting as a gesture, a simple act of kindness, but now I realized it was so much more. This was not just a reunion, it was a reminder of who these soldiers truly were beneath their uniforms, sons, brothers, and boys who still needed the warmth of home. I cleared my throat and stepped forward. "It's time," I announced gently. A hush fell over the room, and for a moment no one moved. Then slowly the mothers and sons rose, reluctant to let go. There were final embraces, whispered promises to write, and quiet prayers spoken into the air. And as I looked around, I knew that this moment, brief as it was, would remain with them forever. No matter where they went, no matter how far from home they traveled, this day would be a light in the darkness, a memory to hold on to. In the loneliest of nights, the time had come. The soldiers stood beside their mothers, reluctant to part. Some held on to their mothers' hands a little longer, their fingers tightening as if they could freeze this moment in time. Others looked away, their eyes filled with emotions they weren't ready to show. The air was thick with unspoken words, words with love too deep for simple goodbyes. One by one the soldier straightened their backs, their training taking over. They had spent years learning discipline, standing tall in the face of hardship, but now in front of the women who had given them life, they were simply sons. I saw young men hesitate, their lips pressing into thin lines as they fought against the ache of leaving. One soldier wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one would notice. His mother noticed, of course, but she didn't say a word. She simply cued his face in her hands and smiled, her eyes shining with pride. Mothers too struggled to let go. One woman tucked a small note into her son's pocket, whispering, "Read this when you feel lonely." Another mother kissed her son's forehead the way she had when he was a child, her fingers lingering in his short, cropped hair. "I'll be waiting," she promised. Her son nodded, unable to speak. I stood near the door watching as the last goodbyes were exchanged. A few soldiers had already turned away, their jaws clenched, trying to hold on to their composure. But as they reached the door, many of them stole one last glance. Their mothers stood still, watching them with the same tender expressions they had when sending them off to school so many years ago. Then one voice broke the silence. "Take care of yourself, my boy," a mother called out. Her son turned, flashing a small sad smile before stepping into the hallway. That one Voice opened the floodgates, more voices followed, soft goodbyes, reminders to eat well, promises to write. It was as if they couldn't let go, as if they needed one more moment, one more word to hold on to. As the last soldier left the room, the others stood together, some holding on to each other for support. Their sons were gone again, back to their duties, back to the world of discipline and war, but something had changed. The weight of love, of memory, of home. These things would stay with the soldiers long after this day ended. I turned to leave, my heart heavier than I expected. This had been just another event, another duty to fulfill, but as I walked down the hall I realized something. This moment had mattered. These men, these soldiers, would carry today with them through long nights and endless marches. When the world felt cold, they would remember the warmth of their mother's arms, the quiet strength of their love, and perhaps in the darkest moments of their journeys, that love would be enough to bring them home.